Every voice matters. Blue Lift is a podcast dedicated to address the issues that affect all of us, with engaging discussions with progressive thought leaders and experts as guests. Here's your host, Peggy Kingsbury.
That's right. We're back for another edition of Blue Lift, and I have a super duper special guest for us today. I have my friend and neighbor, sort of, Nancy French with us. I know that's a name a lot of you have heard because she's kind of sort of famous, and so I feel sort of excited about this. Nancy has collaborated on multiple books for celebrities. She's a ghostwriter, which doesn't mean she writes about ghosts, but I don't know, maybe someday she will, you know. But she helps other people get their stories out. 5 of the books that she's ghostwritten have made the New York Times bestseller list. And she's also written some books under her own name, and we're going to talk about one of those today. She's conducted a multi-year journalistic investigation into something we are definitely going to talk about today. She's written commentary and published for the nation's most prominent newspapers and magazines. We're going to talk a little bit about something she wrote for the Washington Post as well. She's currently working on her own memoir, which I guess is part of this book that we're going to talk about today, but then there's more. And we just don't know what Nancy might do next. Whatever it is, it's going to be great. You're going to hear about it, and I think you're going to love it. So welcome, Nancy French.
Thank you for having me. This is exciting.
It is.
I've never been on a podcast to lift Democratic voices.
Oh, wow. Well, and you know, our motto at Blue Lift is every voice matters.
Okay.
And so we've had lots of different kinds of voices here. I really believe every voice matters, and I'm very passionate about the fact that if we don't use our voice, it can't matter. So we all should use our voice.
That's right.
Here is Nancy's latest book. It's called Ghosted, An American Story. And you can get this at all the place you get books. I love independent booksellers. So, you know, we've got a lot of those here in Tennessee. One of my favorite is Parnassus Books, which is near Nashville. We've also got some here, and I think there's actually one in your neighborhood where you live.
That's right. Bound Books in West Haven and Franklin, Tennessee. They have signed copies.
Oh, there you go. Yay. But you can also get it on your big book place that might rhyme with Damazon.
She can't even say the word. It's a profanity in her mouth. It's died.
I said Damazon. I like that. I'm going to start using that. Wow. It's hard to know where to start because there's so many rich stories in this book. But I have to tell you, the thing that I thought about it, I've read it twice, and I bought about 5 copies because I keep giving them away.
Nice. Don't you have more friends than 5?
Yeah,
come on.
I know. It's sort of shocking, isn't it, being a loud and proud Democrat in Tennessee? There aren't many of us left.
That's true, yeah.
But, the thing that I noticed about it every time I read it and think about it is life is not a straight line. And your story, it says an American story. I just really think it's a human story because so many things have happened to you, both good and bad, and you write about those. But it's so true of all of us. And I challenge everyone I give this book to. I challenge them to not, or let's see, what do I challenge? I challenge them to read the book and then find themselves in the stories. Every single time it happens, we find ourselves in your stories.
Oh.
Something like that happened to me. Oh, I know like someone that happened to. And I love when a book does that because it makes you feel like your story, even though our personal stories are unique, but it makes you feel like there's some camaraderie with people who have been through things, both good and bad. Let's talk a little bit about I want to say this. I'm not going to give away everything that's in the book because I want people to buy it and read it. Yeah. So we're not just going to rehash the stories in your book. We're going to talk about some other things. You wrote something in the Washington Post in 2016, and it was basically what it's like to experience the 2016 election as both a conservative and a sex abuse survivor.
That's right.
Tell me about that.
So I've always been Republican. My first political memory was coming home from kindergarten at about this time of year and seeing Ronald Reagan ascend to the presidency. And I was so distraught because I had only learned about politics through fairy tales. And so I thought that presidents were kings. and I thought there'd been some sort of insurrection, and our king had been toppled. And so I was distraught over that. But that was the last time that I was upset over Ronald Reagan. I loved him. I used to take pictures and like take the Weekly Reader and cut out pictures of him and put them on my wall. And I pretty much stayed that way my whole life until 2016 when Donald Trump came down the escalator. And I was just a little confused because the things that I thought made us Republicans, he didn't share those values. And so suddenly I was like, well, I thought it wasn't like I had become a Republican because I thought it was cool or because I liked the vibe. It was because I had certain values.
Right.
But then the values changed and no one noticed or no one mentioned it. It was like, oh yeah, we're going to make fun of a prisoner of war, John McCain now. That's what we do. We mock the military. And I didn't think that was appropriate. And it just gave me such pause that I couldn't support someone who is a sexual predator. Because, this was before all of his actual sexual predation came out. It was just whispers and rumors. It was before the Access Hollywood tape. But it wasn't that I had this acumen, this amazing political acumen where I could perceive that he was a sexual predator. He just was. And we now know that he is.
Well, and we knew about all of his marital escapades because the New York press would keep us informed about all of that.
Yeah, and I remember, I'm no Bill Clinton fan. I believe that Bill Clinton is probably a rapist. The Juanita Broderick story. I looked at all of them, and she's just one of like 16 people. I don't know. I don't know the number. But when Bill Clinton was in office, I said very passionately, well, I think character matters in our presidential leaders.
Didn't we all say that?
Yeah. Well, the Democrats didn't. I mean, Kamala Harris invited him to speak at her convention, right? I mean, it's like the Democrats really, that's one thing that drives me insane, is that I think all people should say, okay, sexual predators have no place here. Doesn't mean they can't be forgiven, loved, moved on in
There's
society.
There's going to be a lot of guys out of politics if we do that, though, Nancy.
That's okay.
We're going to really thin the herd.
That's right. But anyway, I maintained the same position that I did from 1998 about character mattering and public officials. And that made me about as popular as head lice in the Republican Party. So anyway, I decided to write an article in the Washington Post about it. And the reason why I felt so passionately about it is because I had been the victim of a pedophile situation at church. And it really affected my life in a very debilitating way. And so I felt like I needed to tell people that to explain why I had this visceral reaction against Trump. And so I did in the Washington Post. But I had not even told my therapist about it. I was not emotionally healed. And therefore I was like, okay, now that I've dealt with that, I want to use this to make a political point. Rather, I had this biographical thing in my life that I felt was necessary to share. And so I shared it for the first time with the public in the Washington Post.
Wow.
And so,
you don't do things halfway, do you?
No. And I hadn't even been able to tell my therapist about it. He told me to go home and write it down and then the next week bring it in and just read it so that I wouldn't have to say it out loud. He was going to read it and then he would know what happened. So the next week I came in and I just handed him a copy of the Washington Post and I was like, okay, you told me to write about it. Here it is. And he was like, oh, that's interesting. This is not how it's normally done, but I think we can work with it.
Yeah.
So anyway, but when I wrote that article, it just changed my life because I no longer was carrying the water of a party that had left me.
Interesting. And I do see that, and you do go into that situation of the sexual abuse in your book. And it's such a clear indication of the ways in which it affected your life, because that sort of thing, when that thing happens to a woman or a man, it affects the decisions you make following.
Right.
And so typically there's some sort of bad decisions that are made following that because, I think our brains get scrambled when something like that happens to us. And so I can see that. And I can only imagine how that must have felt to have seen the party that you loved, championing someone who was guilty of the thing that it very nearly destroyed your life.
Yes, and that's an important point. And I think the reason I think it's important is because when you are a victim of sexual abuse as a kid, you don't act right. Especially if people don't know, especially if you haven't received the care. I mean, like maybe some people act right. I did not. I did not clothe myself in glory in terms of how I acted after that. And the reason why I wanted to sort of not confess it, but sort of describe it is because I think what happens is you have someone accuse a public figure of something. And the public figure who might be a senator like Roy Moore or, like Judge Moore, who was running in Alabama for Senate, his accuser was like, I want to tell the story about what happened with Roy Moore, but I can't because I've been divorced 3 times. And my life has turned out horribly. And he's going to point his finger at me and say, why would you trust this immoral person?
Right. And because that's what we do. Yes.
Because that's what we do. And when I read her quote about that, I felt so devastated because I was like, that's how I feel. But I can pass as a Christian, upstanding person because that's what I am.
Yes, you are. Yeah.
However, I don't want to hide the fact that I've had this journey.
Right.
And I don't want to denigrate people for having different journeys.
Correct. Yes. And I got that. I got that from the book for sure. The real twist for me about your story of abuse is it was church centric, which not only affected, I'm making an assumption here based on what I've read and based on knowing you, I think it affected how your relationship with men developed, but then your relationship with the church.
Right.
And sadly, your relationship with your family.
Yeah. It's like, it's like a bomb explodes in your life and there's just shrapnel everywhere.
Did you talk with your family before the book came out and tell them what was in it?
Yes. I went to my parents and just was like, I have been avoiding this conversation, but I want to be honest with you. I want to tell you about my book and I'm not asking for your permission. I'm asking for your blessing.
Oh, wow.
And because I really love my parents and I wanted to honor them in this process. And so we had a very long 3-hour conversation and it was tearful and it was wonderful and it was agonizing. And at the end of the conversation, they gave me my blessing and I'm so thankful for that. Not only because they gave me the blessing and I was able to go forth with a clean conscience, but also because I otherwise would not have had those difficult conversations. A lot of times you infantilize your parents.
Right.
And you're like, oh, I don't want to bother them. I don't want to upset them. And you don't have difficult conversations. And so they were amazing. And I'll forever be thankful for them giving me a blessing for this book.
And I know there's a section in the book where you and your mother got really sideways. I'm assuming that's healed and she's okay about that being in the book.
Well, I asked her about it and and I said, Mom, for example, I'm including this scene. And she says, I never did that. And I was like, Mom, well, are you okay if I write that? Because that did happen. And she was like, yeah, you can. Just do whatever you need to do. And so she was just amazing.
Wow.
Yeah. Their response to me in this book was really healing in ways that I can't ever describe.
That is so cool. So by writing the book, you were able to bring some of that stuff out for healing. I love that.
Yeah. And just to talk about it, because sometimes you carry these secrets forever and you think, if anybody knows this, they will discard me or they will think I'm this or whatever. But I'm 50 and I am okay with the truth. I'm not trying to, like I told my publisher, I was like, my goal is to not be invited to church to speak about this book because I'm not presenting myself as some sort of Christian expert or even the stuff in the book about God. I don't even know if it's theologically correct. Some people read it and they say, this is heretical. And I'm like, okay, well, this happened. So this is what I'm going to write because I am not God's marketing director.
Right.
He doesn't need me. And so I just want to be honest with what happened in my life. And I think it's resonated with people because sometimes weird stuff happens spiritually.
Sure it does.
You talked about ghosts,
Yeah.
People have strange stories. Let's talk about it. We don't know what it is, but let's talk about it. So I included some of that supernatural stuff in my book. And I don't even have the answer to it to this day. This stuff happened. I don't understand it, but I want you to know anyway. That was my approach.
And it's fine when we don't understand things. I mean, I've had, things happen to me where I think, well, I don't know who's talking to me about this, the universe, God, intuition. I don't know what it is, but I'm going to trust it and follow it, because when I do that, everything usually kind of gets okay eventually, and I think it is a sign of maturity when we don't have to have a full explanation for everything.
Right.
Yeah. And isn't that how, children don't have to have a full explanation of where, how does Santa fit down the chimney? Oh, we don't have a chimney. How's that whole thing work? How does he get around the world? They don't have to have a full explanation for it. They just appreciate it, grab onto it, and sort of get the joy out of it. And then we go through this time in our lives where, everything's got to be proven to us. And then I think as we get wiser and a little bit older and have some maturity behind us, it doesn't really matter if it doesn't fit in a box. It happened, and I'm going to receive from it what I can. I love that. Well, let me ask you, so since in 2016, it was a difficult situation for you as a Christian, a conservative, and a sex abuse survivor to see Donald Trump coming down the escalator like a hero. And you said he was being crowned king. Well, eventually the emperor has no clothes. I don't know when we're going to notice that, but
Thanks for that visual.
Yeah. Oh, I know. I was just thinking about that myself. I was thinking, I can't believe I said that. In 2024, it's like, boom, we're going to hit you with that again, Nancy.
I know, it's crazy.
And not only that, we're gonna one up it. We're gonna add Hexeth into the mix. How's that feeling?
You know what? I am so disconnected politically. After I wrote the book, I got cancer.
Yeah.
And so I got diagnosed, and I hadn't even finished editing the book. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to fight for my life for the next year. So I'm happy to tell you I'm cancer-free, but I have disconnected from pretty much every political obligation. Yeah, I used to be a political ghostwriter. I don't even know what's going on very much. I mean, I probably know more than most people, but it's only because my husband, David French, writes for the New York Times. And so we have conversations constantly about stuff.
I'm sure, yeah.
But I'm not reading the paper. I'll read David's articles or get the audio version when he reads them to me before he publishes them. But I've just decided to double down on things that are community building. I decided if my rhetorical skills were so bad that I could not convince Christians not to support a person who has been held liable in court for rape, incited an insurrection, and a list of other things. If I cannot convince Southern Christians not to vote for someone like that, my rhetorical skills need to be retired. So I'm just like putting those in a box, and I'm like, I'm going to do something else. I'm not going to have these conversations ad nauseum for the next 4 years.
Well, that's healthy. That's healthy. And obviously, and this, it's going to take more than rhetorical skills. It's, because it's like a cult, basically, and you can't convince a Moonie. Moon's not a big thing. That's just, and people are thinking, who are the Moonies? Well, you're not as old as I am, so you don't know who that is, but Google it. So I want to ask about some investigative journalism that you've been involved in. How long have you been working on the Camp Kanakuk?
Kanakuk.
Kanakuk. I have the hardest time. You spell it Kanakuk.
Right.
Kanakuk. How long have you been working on that story?
So probably about 3 years. So for a little background on that, I'm a 3-time college dropout, not to brag. My husband, who is very rude, says that he characterizes me as very ambitious. I might drop out of more colleges before it's all said and done. But I am not a trained journalist and not a trained writer. And so Gretchen Carlson, who used to work for Fox News and blew the whistle on Roger Ailes, through my ghostwriting occupational trajectory, I met her. And so she emailed me and she was like, there's this camp in Missouri in Branson called Kanakuk. It's apparently a big deal. and I had never heard of it, but 25,000 children per summer go there. It's might be the world's largest athletic camp, Christian athletic camp.
And it is a Christian camp.
It is a Christian camp. And so
and is it tied in with a Southern Baptist or?
Tangentially it is, because Joe White, the CEO, is an ordained Southern Baptist preacher, but he is, but it's all denominations.
Gotcha.
And so she said, I heard that they have an abuse issue there, and I heard that they are silencing it through NDA, non-disclosure agreements or whatever.
Oh, aren't those used a lot for that kind of thing?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And so I was like, not interested. But I didn't know how to tell Gretchen Carlson no. And so I was like, I'll look into it. So I immediately talked to my husband, and I was like, there is no way that I want to investigate pedophilia at a Christian camp in Branson, Missouri. It sounds awful. It sounds onerous. It sounds difficult. I don't even want to know the word pedophilia. And I was talking to actually my therapist about it. And as I was saying the words, it made me think of my own abuse, because people in my church knew that this guy was a bad guy, but they had the same posture I did. They didn't want to know about it, didn't want to do anything about it, and they were going to sit this one out to great consequence. I mean, terrible consequence. So I was saying the same words that maybe they were thinking, you know, in Paris, Tennessee in the 1980s or 90s or whatever. And so I decided that I felt like the Holy Spirit convicted me, and it was like, okay, you have to do something. So I told Gretchen that I'd work on it for 30 days. I was going to keep my name out of it. I was going to look into it. And then 3 years later, I'm still talking about it. I eventually wrote, I think, 8 articles, several for the Dispatch, 2 for the Springfield News Leader in Missouri, and 1 for USA Today.
Now, have any of the players in this horrible, horrible thing, have any of them been punished for what they've been doing?
So, yes. So the story is that people might know that at Kanakuk camps had a sexual predator there that had hundreds of victims. His name was Pete Newman. He was convicted, and he's in prison forever.
And this went on for years. He was getting away with this for years.
Yeah, he was not getting away with it. He was doing it with a lot of the stuff that he was doing that was sexually abusive. The camp leadership knew. And so that's what I set out to prove. And I did prove it. But additionally, not only did I prove that the camp had heard reports of this guy, Pete Newman, being nude with campers, convincing campers to disrobe, being nude with campers when they were four-wheeling, basketball playing, running, swimming, all kinds of really weird.
And when I read the nude and four-wheeling thing, that was a tough one to read, because I'm thinking, physically, that's weird.
Really weird.
Yeah. And I've been four-wheeling. It can be pretty bumpy.
A little bumpy. Yeah. There's a lot.
What?
I know. Awful. And so the camp leadership knew about all that. And Pete Newman would talk about his hot tub Bible studies when he would give his chapel talks. Now, I've talked to the victims. Those hot tub Bible studies were horrific. Sodomy, rape, all kinds of bad stuff. So in my investigation, I learned that the prosecutor estimated there were hundreds of victims, and the camp knew for 10 years that he was doing a bunch of this questionable stuff. And they not only didn't fire him, which they should have according to their own documents and rules, they promoted him. They gave him a house on camp property that was outfitted with candy, drawers, and like maybe a fireman's pole, everything. It was like so cliched like a stereotype of what a pedophile would want. Regardless, that guy's in jail.
But why did they, and we have to just guess here, I suppose. Why did they ignore it for that long?
Well, we don't have to guess, because I was able to get the deposition materials, and I could hear Joe White, the CEO of Kanakuk, actually say that the reason they did not want to get rid of Pete was because he was very popular. And he brought in a lot of people to do Bible studies. That translates into a lot of money, because the camp operates, in some of the sessions are like $6,000 a person. So this is not your normal evangelical camp. This is the kind of place you couldn't afford to go. You know, when I was a kid, I couldn't. So that's just one guy. But what I uncovered in my investigation, as I talked to victims and talked to campers, they told me of other predators. So I kept a list. To this day, I think the list is at 61. I've talked to people who were victimized sexually at Kanakuk who are 75.
Wow.
And I've talked to people who are 20. So this has gone on forever. And suicides. People would call me and they say, oh, my brother was a victim of Pete Newman and he killed himself. I've heard that about 17 times. And also one of the people who died was a predator, a different predator that no one's ever heard about, who got caught by the Dallas police. And the day he got caught, he died. He killed himself in a car accident. Maybe it was accidental. But yeah, it's mysterious. And all of that I proved. It took me forever because I'm a college dropout. I don't know how to do this stuff. I had to literally, so I went to the New York Times, I went to the Washington Post, I went to Christianity Today and begged them to take this on because I don't know how to investigate anything. And they, for various reasons, all said no. Mainly because it was a huge freaking project. It really required maybe 4 people working around the clock for a year.
Right.
So, but I felt convicted that I needed to do something about it. So I literally sat down and decided to do it myself. And I started by Googling, what does off the record mean? Because I didn't know. Did you know there's like a lot of different variations of that? I didn't.
Oh,
know.
yeah.
Okay.
And I've learned, that if you're talking to a reporter, you better get it right or you're not really off the record.
Right. And
whose record are you off is the question.
Right.
Yes.
And also there's on background
Yes.
and I didn't know any of that. So anyway, I looked it up and started doing it. And 3 years, I'm here, 3 years later, I've done all the stuff. And my big disappointment, and the reason why I think this is salient and important to talk about, is I proved everything. And the church had a collective shrug of the shoulders of apathy. And I will never get over it. The camp is still full.
The camp is still operating pretty much as it always has, right?
Yes, and the church has not held it responsible. Some churches may have dropped Kanakuk Camp out or this or that. In fact, I know of a few. But the camp is operational. People created a hashtag that was like, I know and I still go.
Are you serious?
Oh, yeah.
You just said that people created a hashtag that said, I know and I still go.
Oh, yeah. And that's not even the prominent Christians.
How messed up is that?
It's so depraved. I can't even comprehend it. But that's just normal people. So let's give them a pass and think about the Christian celebrities that are associated with this camp, including but not limited to Michael W. Smith, who is appearing there in May to celebrate their Kanakuk's 100th anniversary.
And he knows about this story.
He does.
We know he knows about this
We know
story.
he does. And he also has written songs for the camp every summer for years and years and years. He has a cabin there called Smitty's House.
Well, now, I have to ask you this. Since you live near Michael W. Smith, have you ever talked with him about this?
I haven't. I would love to talk to him about it. So, Michael, if you're listening, give me a call.
I'm sure Michael is driving around in his Maserati listening to Blue Lift. That's not happening.
That's not happening.
But we, 6 degrees of separation, and in Williamson County, it's probably we can get it down to 3. We may know somebody who knows him.
Okay.
We need to put a bug in his ear.
Okay, listeners, if y'all know Michael W. Smith, give him my number. There's a lot of, I won't name them all here because it makes me so despondent. But, it's just so devastating to me that people like Michael W. Smith are still talking positively about this camp. And it's not because I think, well, this bad thing happened 10 years ago. We ought to forever, treat them, ostracize them. It's not that. They've never come clean about it.
Right.
And they're currently getting sued because of my reporting. New information was revealed that opened up a lot of litigation. And so several people, victims now, most of them are out of statute of limitations, but several people are suing the camp now. So let's just say that churches had the protocol of not doing business with an institution that's currently suffering multiple, lawsuits for sexual abuse and fraud. Maybe that would eliminate the entire camp.
Right.
But we just overlook it. And so it makes me so despondent, so sad. I've been in despair over it.
There's a cancer in the system of the camp. And I just don't understand, when I've read your you're reporting on this, a lot of it, and I always think back about how many children went home and told their parents what had happened. And some of them may have gotten the similar reaction that you got in your story.
That's exactly right. And I'll have to tell you, there was a guy in Louisiana who videoed a message to me and sent it. And he said, I was abused by Pete Newman at Kanakuk. I was 12. I came home and told my parents, and they did not believe me until this moment when I forwarded them your articles.
Oh, my goodness.
I mean,
but that makes it all worth it right there. Just that one.
Just that one. And I've heard that over and over
because
and over.
There can be family reconciliation now, which is important.
Yes. And families have come together because of this. The most beautiful stories. I really find it hard to believe that any parent in a church, and this camp gets, I would say, most all of their campers from church affiliations, would send their child to this camp, knowing that this is an unresolved issue. It's unresolved. They're still lying about it. It's not even unresolved, is that they're currently lying about it. And do you know what they say? I just love for my kids to learn about Jesus at Kanakuk. Think about all the people who have been baptized at Kanakuk. Pete Newman himself baptized probably hundreds of people, which is so awful.
It's horrible.
But why would you trust an institution that is lying to teach the gospel correctly? Lying is like one of the big 10 that you're not supposed to do. Let's just agree not to lie.
Yeah.
Just that.
And let's agree not to make people sign a form saying you'll never tell the truth.
Yeah.
Because withholding the truth and lying are essentially the same thing in my book.
Yes. And there was a kid that was a victim named Ashton Alarcon, and he did not want to sign the NDA because, and he told this to Joe White, the Kanakuk CEO, or at least the camp leadership, I want to be able to share my testimony in church one day if I ever get over this.
Oh, wow.
And do you know what Kanakuk did? They retaliated against that family legally to the tune of like tens of thousands of dollars. And Joe Alarcon, Ashton's dad, was my source. I heard that there was one Texas family that did not sign an NDA, and I sought out to find these people.
Wow.
And I found them, and they handed me everything, and that's how the case got cracked.
How did they feel when you found them? I mean, what was their reaction when you reached out?
You can imagine how stubborn Joe Alarcon is if he faced down a multi-million-dollar camp. Yeah. And he's this Texas swagger, and so I got on the phone with him and I was like, hi, Mr. Alarcon, my name is Nancy French and I'm doing this. And I explained it to him and he was like, I'm definitely not giving you this document. He goes, why would I give you any of these documents? You, like everybody else, are going to fold when the camp comes after you, and they will come after you. They will sue you. They will threaten you. They will harass you. They will bully you, and you do not have what it takes.
It sounds like Scientology, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. It sounds just like it.
Yeah. But Joe Alarcon so helped me. I talked to him that first conversation for 3 hours. And at the end of the 3 hours, I said the following, and this probably does not reflect well on my character. But I said, okay, so my husband, David, is working with me on this first article. David faced down a president because he helped sue the Obama administration for their IRS harassment of various Tea Party groups under the Lois Lerner leadership, and won. We defied President Trump and lived to tell the tale. And he joined the army after 9/11 and sat knee to knee with al-Qaeda terrorists. We are not afraid of a Christian camp director in Branson, Missouri. That's not what we're going to do here. So you're going to have to trust me. And do you know what that man had the audacity to say to me? So remember, I'm doing all of this for free. I'm just doing it on my own. I had to quit my job to do this.
It became a mission. Yeah.
He said, I will give it to you, maybe, after I look into your eyes. So I had to literally get in a plane
and go
to Texas and meet with the Alarcons. And it was the most beautiful thing. I love that family. I'll love them forever. David and I went down there. We met with the whole family, and they...
And I'm assuming that they also sort of looked at it and probably thought, we wondered if anybody would ever show up.
Yes. And what's so beautiful about that? I didn't know how to be an investigative journalist. What I did was I went to the internet. I looked under Pete Newman's video on YouTube that said, that was his when he was sentenced, and people made comments. And one person who had a screen name said something that made me think he might have been a victim, but he didn't use his real name. And that was 12 years ago. So I looked up that screen name and I found it in a Japanese anime site. If you put a gun to my head, I could not tell you what Japanese anime is, but I joined that site and I created my own avatar. And I found a guy that had the same avatar name as that guy from 12 years ago. And I messaged him in this Japanese anime system. And would you believe, a week later, I got a message from him. And he said, I have been waiting 12 years for your message.
Wow. That's amazing.
Amazing.
That's incredible. So how many lawsuits are ongoing now over this thing? And have you been sued?
Well, they did. So the number of lawsuits I know is more than 3, but I can't exactly say because some of them are surreptitious. But they did. So I published my first article and I got a FedEx package in the mail, and it was a cease and desist order. And my hands were shaking. I was crying. I was shaking so much I could not read it. And David, my husband, who is a constitutional attorney, very well-respected attorney, he said, what is wrong with you? And I was like, Kanakuk is threatening to sue us. They say we have 10 days to correct the record on our mistakes, quote unquote. And so he took the envelope and I'm bawling and he reads them out loud and he starts laughing. He was like, this is the most hilarious thing that I have ever seen in my life, because our mistakes were stuff like this. Like Joe White, the Kanakuk CEO, he had a pilot named Robert John Morgan who abused his own daughter in a felonious way and admitted it. And Joe White offered the pedophile a cabin at Kanakuk to hang out and live there until his trial.
Oh my.
And then went to the judge and said that he didn't think that this person should be in prison because he does so much good work for the community. He's better outside the prison walls than in, all this stuff. And
it's like they're running a halfway house for pedophiles. Oh, and a camp for children.
Except not a halfway house. They're not encouraging anyone to change. It's like, anyway, but the lawyer's cease and desist letter said that my error was not pointing out that Joe White was benevolently offering this guy housing out of the goodness of his own heart. So David starts laughing at this. He was like, this is the most asinine thing I've ever seen in my life.
That is asinine.
And so they said that we had 10 days to take down this article or to correct our quote unquote mistakes. And like the ineffectual mother counting to 10, they did not do anything when the countdown extinguished. Right. And so I was like, okay, I survived. And so I felt like it was just a really clarifying moment, because I don't send my kids to Kanakuk in Branson, Missouri. I've never even been to Branson, Missouri. And I was risking everything I had to tell this story. And that's why I was so sad that the church responded in such a lackluster way.
But but it's also so interesting that you're the kind of person who will put things on the line because they affect others negatively.
Right.
And I look at our current political situation and our current church situation, which sadly are now intertwined together. And I see that is really becoming something that is so seldom done now. It's like, if it doesn't affect me and mine, I don't care about it.
Right.
And I was, a very, very devout, faithful Southern Baptist. And that was really one of the cornerstones of my faith, that I care about other people, even when it doesn't affect me. And we're missing that. We're just gliding over that now. It's, if it doesn't affect me and my house, I really don't care what happens to other people. And that's very sad. I just had a guest on before you, and we talked about vouchers. And I don't even know how you feel about that. But, my concern about it is, and obviously it doesn't affect me. I don't have any kids. And I'm old anyway. My kids should have already dropped out of college 7 or 8 times by now. But, I think it affects communities that I'm not a part of. It affects children that are not part of my community. And so I care about them. Mm-hmm. And it just makes me very sad that we're becoming the kind of society that thinks it's okay just to think about ourselves. And your book and your life story and this investigation are all ways that you are showing you care about others who are not you.
Right. Well, children.
I know.
It's not even that hard to care about children.
Well, they're
cute.
Well, and doesn't, yes, they are generally. Doesn't but I mean, isn't that sort of the mantra of what we see going on now in Congress? It's all for the children. We care about children. And, people like me look at that and I say, well, okay, then let's feed them. Let's house them. Let's educate them. Let's keep them safe. And because whatever you're doing is not really caring about children.
Well, right. So let's add an addendum. If you find out that children are being, I'm trying not to be too graphic, but abused, be outraged.
Exactly.
If you really cared about children, be outraged at that. And that's what gets me is that you have all of these people, conspiracy theorists, that will tell you that Joe Biden is a pedophile and there is something about Pizzagate or whatever. When I proved...
Yeah, yours is real.
I proved it. And how many times has Kanakuk been mentioned on Fox News?
I don't know that. Well, it's not like I'm sitting around watching Fox News, Nancy. But I'm guessing the answer is 0. I don't know. You have to tell me.
I don't know. I think it's 0. But there might have been a mention many years ago about something else. But do you see what I mean?
Yes,
it's like,
yes.
So when people come at me with these conspiracy theories about pedophilia, I'm just like, is that what you care about? And this is what I learned. We care about it if it's not people in our tribe. So it is very easy to say that Bill Clinton is a racist, a rapist, or Harvey Weinstein, because that's what democratic ideology will bring.
Right.
That's what the leftist Hollywood agenda naturally leads to. And then you say, okay, well, what about Deacon Bill?
Exactly.
And they're like, absolutely not. Doesn't even exist. How dare you? And so my message to America is, to the American church, you can walk and chew gum at the same time. That's not in 1 Corinthians. That's from me. But it is possible to use the same application of logic to people who are with you and sit beside you in the pew and people that you see on TV that you naturally have disgust for. It is possible to just say, predators are bad.
Right.
I'm not going to be a part of that.
Right.
And I can call them out regardless of what letter is beside their name or whether or not they're Baptist.
Well, and it does go down to denomination because I am old enough to have lived through the scandals of the Catholic Church. And I can remember hearing in my Southern Baptist church how bad those Catholics are. And don't you know, they don't pray straight to Jesus, so they're going to hell anyway.
Yeah.
And look what they've done. And they've let these priests abuse these boys, Catholics, bad, bad, bad. And here we are, and it's the very same thing.
That's right.
Very same thing.
Oh, yeah. The Catholics are bad. Hollywood leftists are bad. Democrats, bad. And then they give this camp is so guilty of so much stuff. And then to see a hashtag from a Baptist that says, I know and I still go. Like, for example, the CEO of the Kansas City Chiefs is Clark Hunt.
Yes.
They are huge Kanakuk supporters.
Isn't his wife very involved in things?
Tavia Hunt sent her children there. They raise money for them. I mean, it boggles the mind that this can happen in 2024. This is when all of that came out. It's just sad. It's like, I don't know how I'm ever going to be the same. I will never be the same. I don't know how to do life now. Knowing what I know, I am a fundamentally changed person because I just don't expect. I think I grew up thinking there were good guys and there were bad guys, and it was very easy to tell the difference.
It's not easy. No.
Well, I learned that the good guys were in the church, and you have to be suspicious of the people outside the church. But now, someone hands you a business card with an ichthus on it, and you're like, I don't know if this is necessary for plumbing, but thank you. You know what I mean? It's just like, it makes you feel suspicious.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Well, and I don't understand why someone of huge stature is not willing to come forth and bring this out. But it truly is a made-for-TV miniseries. When are we going to see that?
I don't know. Honestly, I feel like working on this Kanakuk thing almost killed me. It was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. And I just had to eventually I'm not entirely done with it, but my thing is I probably published 3% of what I know about this camp and no one cared. I'm not going to continuously investigate it. There's enough information out there for parents to know. When I started, if you Googled Kanakuk, it was all, children blowing bubbles and swimming and whatever, jet skiing. Now, when you Google Kanakuk camps in Branson, Missouri, it's like all hell has been unleashed because of me, and I'm so thankful.
Which is good because you can rest assured. I know there are parents who did not send their children there because they've Googled it and seen what you.
That's right.
Have reported.
And my husband chastises me. He goes, "It was not a futile attempt.
No,
a lot of good came of it. I'm glad that parents can Google and know the truth now, and I would do it all again just to tell the victims that I love them and that I honor their stories. So I'm very thankful for that. And now there's litigation, and I'm very thankful for, all of those things. I've just been so sad because all of this sort of coincided with the Southern Baptist debacle with their, sexual predator list that was revealed. That came out 1 week before my last Kanakuk stuff. And, I was just like, come on, Baptist.
Right. The largest evangelical denomination should be doing a better job. And that's probably a whole nother podcast, isn't it?
It probably is. But, it's just that the idea that the church is not only going to turn a blind eye, they actively protect.
Yes.
Predators.
Very actively protect.
Very actively.
And not just deny the victims the right to have their say, but also sometimes blame them, victim shaming.
Yeah, and then put them through unnecessary legal stuff that could bankrupt them.
Yes.
It's so
horrible.
It's so bad.
So horrible. Well, I'm so grateful that you've done this research and you've put this out there into the universe. I am still a bit of a Pollyanna, even at my age, and I believe that eventually everything will end up as it should. Hopefully in our lifetime, we can see some justice and we can see that this sort of thing will stop and no more children will have to suffer and the people who need to answer for it should have to. One more topic I want us to discuss because I think it's pretty interesting. There's just so many interesting things about you and your life, and I love reading and hearing about them. Your own journey with your relationship with your church was changed because of the Trump issue, but it was also changed because you and David adopted a child from Ethiopia.
That's right.
Tell us a little bit about that.
So, we have a beautiful daughter who's now a teenager. She's super cute, super wonderful.
She is adorable. I've seen her picture.
Yeah. And so I am the type of person, as you know, I've been a Republican my whole life until 2016. I was the type of person who was like, racism doesn't really exist anymore. We had a black president. You've heard that.
Oh, yes. I have a black friend. We have a black president.
Right. Yeah. And I was the type of person who was like, police brutality, that's sort of exaggerate. Like what? I don't ever see racism in my life. I live in the South. I don't see it. What's the big deal? And I've also lived in New York and Philadelphia and other places. So then we adopt a baby from Ethiopia and she's so cute. And then suddenly I find myself being followed at stores. Or, for example, I had an interaction with a policeman at Nordstrom.
Like, what's that white woman doing with the black baby?
No, it was, ma'am, is this your daughter? We found her in the sunglasses section. And I, like in that instance, for example, I was at Nordstrom Rack because, we're not made of money. I was buying her a Christmas present, yoga pants. And I was like, okay, she doesn't believe in Santa Claus, but I was like, go stand over there or Santa Claus won't come, And so she went and stood 20 feet away from me so I could secretly buy these yoga pants that she picked out. And by the time it took me to check out, a cop had identified her as a possible thief, took her by the arm, brought her to me. I mean, this is the kind of stuff where you're like, well, that's odd. Like, did she look suspicious?
Well, I mean, obviously it's a situation where you should have had the talk with her like Black parents have to have with their children, but you didn't know that because you were denying racism at the time.
Right. And so we had the talk on the way home.
Yeah.
And then you think, well, that's unusual. Maybe that's just an anomaly. So in my neighborhood in Franklin, Tennessee, there's a pool. And I had 2 blonde-haired, blue-eyed kids before Naomi, and we went to the pool all the time. So then I take Naomi to the pool. Right? She lives there. This is normal. It's what you do with your kids. And on 3 different occasions, people approached her to see if she belonged there.
Oh,
Where is her wrist bracelet? Which, by the way, was on her, wait for it, wrist.
Yeah.
Somebody asked, did you jump the fence?
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. And so, that's the kind of stuff you're like, okay, well, that happened 3 times. Is that an anomaly? And anyway, I could tell you story after story. Not only that, but people calling her the N-word at multiple schools. The other day, I picked her up from a football game a few weeks ago, and she and her Latina friend were walking on the sidewalk, and a pickup truck full of rednecks swerved and were screaming the N-word through the window. I saw it. And this happens now, right?
Yeah. In 2024, and I might add, in the wealthiest, most well-educated county in the state of Tennessee.
That's right.
One of the wealthiest, most well-educated in the entire United States.
Right. This is a fancy place. And this all is here. And so I was talking to my husband about it, and we've written about this and talked about it. And for example, my husband wrote an article called Why I Was Wrong About Police Brutality.
Right.
And so you live and learn.
Yes.
You make changes, and hopefully if you get new information, you change. And I was like, why didn't I see it before? And this is what we were talking about at the time. And I think it's pretty true. It's not cool to be a racist if you're a white person in Middle Tennessee. At least it wasn't like 10 years ago. And so if it's not cool or socially acceptable, you don't just say racist things randomly when you're hanging out with white people. You sort of keep it to yourself.
Right.
So let's say that conservatively, 1 out of every 100 people are racist. So not that many. If you're white, you will never encounter it. And if you're Black, think how many times you encounter 100 people, how long it takes you to go through that.
Right.
You're experiencing it constantly.
That's right.
And so our Black friends are saying, y'all don't understand. I was at Nordstrom's and this happened. And we'd be like, really? That doesn't seem right. Anyway, now I've seen it, and I'm sorry I didn't see it before. It is because of, I just didn't know. And
but you experienced it at church as well.
So at church, yeah, I used to belong to the Presbyterian Church of America, which is the conservative branch of the Presbyterian Church, and loved it. And I would just encounter it over and over. And the last time that I went to church, and I told David I'm never going back to church at the PCA, I went, and I had one person who told me that, I know you're writing about Kanakuk, but a lot of people send their kids there. And it was not a compliment. She was not about to thank me.
Right.
And then secondly, another person came up to me and they said, oh, I was reading the Daily Wire and they said that your husband said whatever. And then the last person was a neo-Confederate. And I was standing there with Naomi being lectured by a neo-Confederate, at the Lord's Supper table right next to it.
Oh my goodness.
It wasn't during communion though, not to be hyperbolic. It was right next to it. I was like, I'm not doing this. It actually feels like bad parenting to take my kid to this church.
Yes.
I mean, it's a great church. The leadership is amazing, but I'm not doing that again. And the PCA, we've parted. So I'm thankful to see clearly, but it's a very sad place to be. It's very lonely.
I can imagine. And, for all the ways that we may feel about it, you and I both being white women, Imagine how Naomi feels about it.
I know. And so I want to honor her.
Yes.
And it sounds weird because imagine getting to the pearly gates or whatever happens. I have no idea. And, he's like, well, why didn't you go to church when you lived in Franklin at this place? And you think he might be mad, but I sort of think that Jesus or St. Paul or whoever would say, oh, thank you for not doing that, because that was not honoring to me and you refused to participate in it.
Right.
I just have to assume there's some sort of loophole because I'm still dealing with church guilt. I love church. I now have a great one, Strong Tower in Nashville. But, they're just,
well, don't you think there's a chance that if all of that ever happens, that, what you'll hear at the gates is thank you for loving my creation.
Yeah. Thanks for honoring your kid. Thanks for honoring me by not saying that this is me.
Yeah.
You
well,
know?
and I mean, you're living your life in a way that I don't want to overly butter you up, but you're living your life in a way that is honoring a lot of children by your investigative work. And I want the listeners to run out right now and get this book. I'm telling you, and I realize our conversation here today has been a little bit heavy, but this book's got some funny stuff in it. I mean, laugh out loud, funny stuff mixed in with things that are hard to read, things that'll make you tear up, things that'll make you smile with joy, because it's about a life. And really, truly, the message I take from the book is, life is just not a straight line. There's just a lot of bumps and curves, and it's okay. It's okay. And I try to live, and people who know me really well will tell you this is probably true. I try to live like one of those people. You've read this meme before. When I wake up, God says, "Uh-oh, here we go." Sometimes my hair's on fire. Sometimes, you just never know what I might do and what might happen. But I love that you have the ability to put it in writing. You say you're not an investigative journalist. Yes, you are. You say you're not a writer. Yes, you are. And I think we have more to see from you. Now, if someone wants to keep up with what Nancy's got going on, where would they do that?
Well, if you go to nancyfrench.com, you can read all of my Kanakuk articles. And also a bunch of other stuff.
It's a great website, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And you can follow me on all the things. I'm on all of the things. So please do. You will see some cute pictures of my dogs and my son's cats and maybe my kid if she approves the the gram pictures. But yeah, and I don't really I don't post that much on politics. Sometimes I slide and drop some bombs. But follow me because I love to talk to people. I've been so gratified at taking a step away from politics and just dealing with people without that lens, because so many wonderful people have reached out to me during the cancer process and the cancer journey and the cancer awfulness.
And I so appreciate you sharing that in the way that you have, because you've shared the good and the bad.
Yes.
When your days suck and when you're throwing up on the pickleball court, you share that with us because that's life.
That's right. And I did post some bald pictures. So if you want to go through my timeline, you'll see me.
You're just adorable without hair.
It could have been worse. It could have been some lumpy stuff up there.
You
but
didn't
it was
have
okay.
a lump on your head. And your eyebrows are amazing.
Yes, my main tip on cancer patients is get microblading before you do your first chemo treatment, because that makes you not look as sick. But that's my service to all cancer patients. I literally tell people that. And I was like, I'm so sorry to have to tell you this, but your eyebrows will be gone and this will help you look more healthy.
Yes.
But yeah, I've just been so gratified by that, because I had people from, like George Bush sent me a letter, but so did I got a phone call from Morgan Fairchild.
Oh, wow. Yes.
She's been in wigs.
I'm old enough to remember her.
Well, she's been in wigs since 1980.
Yes.
And so she literally, my phone rang and it was like, hi, this is Morgan Fairchild and I've got some wig advice. And she talked for an hour and I took notes, and she revolutionized my wig game, which is strong. But yeah, it helped me get through. And so I just really I just love my fellow Americans, and I hate what's happened, all this divisiveness and the acrimony. I hate it. And something about getting cancer helped me sort of clarify that I'm just not going to be swimming in those waters, the political waters anymore. My husband writes for the New York Times. We do enough in that realm. I'm just going to try to bring people together. So hopefully I can connect with your listeners online and get to know them as well.
I love that. And my producer is going to put all the ways in the show notes that you can connect with Nancy. Thank you so much for taking time out to do this with us today and talking about some really important topics. One last plug for the book is called Nancy French, Ghosted, An American Story. And you can read a little more in this book about her ghostwriting, which I'm really fascinated by. So thank you all for listening. And remember, every voice matters, but if you don't use your voice, we won't know what you think. We'll see y'all next week.